I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who'd find herself in this situation. 4 years, I was a glue that held everything together, managing the house, cooking meals, organizing birthdays, showing up at school functions. I was that wife, the dependable one. My husband used to pay attention. He used to see me. We had something real once, something passionate. I'm sure of it. But somewhere around our 10th year, something shifted. The words between us grew sparse. His touch vanished. I became more of a fixture than a partner, dependable, unnoticed, just there. It's been a decade since he truly looked at me. Not in passing. Not because I said something. I mean really saw me. Every now and then, I catch him watching while I fold laundry, but it's a kind of look you give a ceiling fan, just checking that it's still running. I tried. Therapy sessions, self-help books, subtle cues. I started dressing up again, lighting candles, even planned a getaway for the two of us. But he was always too tired, exhausted from work, stressed about everything. There was always something more pressing than me. At first, I thought this was normal. Marriages go through phases, right? Maybe this was just one of them. But as the years dragged on, I felt myself disappearing. I began avoiding mirrors, not because of aging or weight, but because a reflection staring back at me had hollow eyes. Her smile felt rehearsed, and even pretending got tiring. The only time I felt needed was when my son called from college. But even those calls began to fade. Last month, he came home for spring break and brought along his best friend. Said he didn't want the guys stuck alone in the dorms. I didn't think much of it. I was just happy to have my son around again. That's when I met Ryan. He was tall, with a kind smile, and polite in a way that felt natural, not forced. He called me Matt first, which made me laugh. I told him, "Please, just call me by my name." Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. He started asking me questions, not the polite, empty kind, but real questions. He asked about my art, something no one had mentioned in years. He noticed a book I left on the kitchen counter, asked about a band I used to love, and he listened. He remembered the little things I said. Then I started to notice the way he looked at me. Not like a mother, not like I was someone he had to be respectful around. There was interest, genuine curiosity. Nothing inappropriate happened. Not even close. But something inside me stirred. Something I thought had withered away long ago. The next day, I wore a different blouse. I dabbed on a little perfume, something I hadn't done in years. I told myself it was silly, that I just enjoyed feeling seen again. But that night, lying in bed, I felt a wave of sadness. I realized how starved I was for attention, for recognition, and how quickly I become addicted to that feeling. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't crossing a line. But inside me, something had undeniably shifted. And deep down, I knew I wouldn't forget the way his gaze lingered a little longer than it should have. At first, the change was barely noticeable. He'd smile when I entered the room, not out of politeness, but in a way that felt personal, warm. He always seemed to find reasons to stick around when I was nearby. My son would head out with friends or step into another room for a call, and suddenly Ryan was in the kitchen, helping me rinse vegetables, asking about my travels, about the person I was before I became someone's mother. That week, I laughed more than I had in years. Not loud, belly-deep laughter, just the kind that bubbles up when you're genuinely amused. The kind you forget you're capable of. He had this easy charm, but it wasn't fake. He looked at me like I mattered. He remembered how I take my coffee. The almond cookies I once mentioned in passing, that I used to paint in college. He even asked if I still did. I told him I didn't have time anymore. He paused for a moment, looked at me, and said, "That's a shame. I bet you were good." That sentence stayed with me all night. I bet you were good. He wasn't just talking about painting. It was the way he said it, like I was someone with talent, someone interesting, someone who still had something to offer. Not just a woman suspended in a life that had quietly stopped moving forward, while her husband worked late and her son gradually outgrew needing her. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and found Ryan on the floor, fiddling with a cable box. He looked up at me and smiled. "You know," he said, "you always smell amazing." I blinked, unsure I'd heard him correctly. There was no smake, no attempt to brush it off like a joke. He said it plainly, as if it were just the truth. My skin flushed with heat. I muttered a quiet thanks and walked out of the room before I embarrassed myself. But even hours later, the smile wouldn't leave my face. I kept telling myself to cut it out. I was acting like some giddy teenager with a harmless crush. This was my son's friend. He was 23. I was married. It was absurd, completely irrational. But none of that could cancel out the way I felt. For the first time in years, I actually felt something. Not just needed or useful, but alive, like a woman again, not just someone fulfilling a role. A person whose life had been reduced to cooking, cleaning, holding things together while quietly falling apart inside. One evening, my son stepped out to grab takeout. Just Ryan and I remained in the kitchen. I stood at the sink, rinsing dishes, trying not to let the silence stretch too long. He leaned against the counter, watching me with a kind of focus that made it hard to think straight. Then he asked, "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, scrambling for a harmless answer. "Nothing important," I replied. But he didn't move, didn't look away. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice lower now. "Do you ever feel invisible?" My hand still beneath the warm water. I couldn't speak, not because I didn't have an answer, but because the truth of it hit too hard. The room filled with unspoken words, thick and heavy. When I finally looked up, our eyes locked and held for just a heartbeat too long. I glanced away first. My chest was pounding. In that moment, I knew I was already past the edge, too fine to turn back without falling. That night, a storm rolled in. The rain hit the windows with steady taps, like a warning I didn't want to hear. My son had gone to spend the night with a friend on the other side of town, plans that shifted last minute. My husband was out of state, away on business. It was just the two of us. Dinner was simple, just pasta and a bottle of wine. We sat across from one another at the kitchen island, talking casually about nothing important. Old films, favorite bands, the weather. But beneath every word was an undercurrent neither of us dared to name. Every laugh, every glance across the counter, dragged me closer to a line I'd sworn I would never cross. I passed him the wine bottle, and our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled back. After dinner, we drifted to the living room and turned on a movie, though neither of us watched. The TV buzzed in the background. Forgotten. The space between us on the couch began to shrink. My heart was thundering in my chest. I could feel his gaze. I could sense him waiting, the way I was, both of us lingering in hesitation that grew heavier by the second. Then he spoke, softly, not even looking at me. "I know this isn't right," he said, "but I can't stop thinking about you." My mouth went dry. My hands felt numb. I turned to face him, and I saw it in his eyes, not just desire, but something deeper. Admiration, longing, like I was someone rare, someone worth holding on to. "We shouldn't," I whispered. He didn't protest. He just nodded. "I know." But neither of us moved. And when he leaned in and kissed me, it was slow, almost hesitant. His fingers brushed my cheek as if asking for permission. I could have stopped it. I should have, but I didn't. I leaned closer, let myself be kissed. Everything after that unfolded with a kind of reverence. Our clothes slipped away gently, like we were afraid that if we moved too quickly, the moment would vanish. We didn't rush. It wasn't driven by lust, but by something deeper, an ache that had lived quietly inside both of us. He touched me like I was something delicate, like I was beautiful, like he couldn't believe I was real. Afterward, we lay in silence, the sound of rain soft against the windows. My heart hurt, not from guilt, not yet, but from a deeper truth. I hadn't been held like that in years. I hadn't been seen. He was the first to speak. "I don't know what this means," he said, but every second of it was real to me. I kept my eyes on the ceiling, nodding. Me too. But inside me, a storm had already begun. I knew what we'd done. I understood the weight of it. And yet, I didn't want to rewind. Not yet. The next morning, the house felt colder, quieter. Ryan was already up when I walked into the kitchen, fully dressed, sitting at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked like he wanted to say something, but stayed silent. I poured my own coffee without speaking. The air between us was heavy with a memory of last night. He left that afternoon, said something had come up. Work, apparently. I nodded like I believed it, like we both believed it. There was no emotional goodbye, no hug, no long look, just a brief nod and a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe restraint. And then he was gone. Later that evening, my son returned, laughing about some inside joke I didn't catch. I didn't react. I smiled like nothing was out of place, laughed at the right moments, made dinner, asked about his plans. My voice was steady. My hands moved calmly. To anyone watching, I looked unchanged. But everything had shifted. Later that evening, I slid into bed beside my husband. He didn't look up. His eyes were fixed on his phone. He muttered, "Night," then turned his back to me. That was all. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts loud in the silence. My body still carried the memory of being held with care, of a kiss that felt chosen, not routine, of being seen, not overlooked, not just touched, but noticed. The guilt didn't slam into me all at once. It crept in quietly, a flicker of shame in the mirror, a weight in my chest I couldn't quite name. And then it deepened, heavier, more jagged. I had crossed a line I couldn't erase. But buried in that remorse, something else stirred, something I hadn't expected. Relief. I hadn't realized how deeply I'd been drowning in my own life. I'd mistaken survival for strength. I believed I was doing the right thing, being loyal, enduring, patient. I convinced myself that love ebbs and flows, that maybe one day things would feel like they once did. But seasons aren't supposed to last 10 years. And waiting had slowly become a kind of dying. Ryan didn't rescue me. He didn't fix my marriage or undo the years of silence. But in a brief, fragile moment, he reminded me I was still a woman, still capable of feeling something real, something warm, something other than numb. It wasn't just desire he gave me, it was recognition. And that scared me even more than the guilt ever could. I don't think I'll ever speak it aloud. The truth costs too much. There's too much to lose. But deep down, I know something inside me shifted that night, and it hasn't gone dormant again. I still move through my days. I still wear the mask. I smile when expected, make coffee, answer questions, laugh at the right times. I still climb into bed beside a man who doesn't see me. But in the quietest moments, when the world goes still, I return to that night. The storm outside, his fingers on my skin, the way he said my name like it mattered. And I remind myself I was alive once, even if only for a single night.